Are you considering a move to the greater Tampa Bay area? Well, today's video, I'm going to cover 7 things that you definitely should know when you're living in Tampa. You're not going to want to miss this. I remember when I first moved to Tampa, there were some things that I just really didn't know about, and I wish someone had shared this information with me then. So that's why I made this video. So let's get to it. Everybody, thanks for tuning into my channel, Living in Tampa, where it's my goal to show you everything you need to know about eating, sleeping, playing, and living in the greater Tampa Bay area. If it's your first time to my channel, do me a big favor, hit that subscribe button, ring the little bell, so you'll be notified every time I release a new video. Today's video, I think, is going to be really relevant for those people that are seriously considering a move to Tampa. These are my top 7 things that you absolutely should know when you're living in this area. So let's not waste any time. I want to get straight to it. Let's go. First and foremost, drive times are long. I really didn't realize this when I first moved here. I wish someone had shared this with me. I didn't realize how spread out Tampa is and how broad of an area is considered greater Tampa. So when you are looking at a map, I think Tampa is one of the more spread out, larger, sprawled cities in Florida. Out of all of them. I mean, of course, you've got Miami is huge, but it's more like a concentrated area. I think Jacksonville is kind of similar, actually, to Tampa. I did live in Jacksonville for several years, and it would take me a really long time to get from one part of Jacksonville to the other. Tampa is exactly like that. It can take you over an hour to get to, say, to the beach from the Tampa side. And a lot of that has to do with our traffic lights. I've got a funny story about that. So my mom and dad, the first time they came to visit us here, I'll share with you that they live on a very small island in Washington. It's literally, the furthest they drive there is probably about 5 miles to get anywhere. So if they're running somewhere, it takes them, no time to go. And then they came here to visit us, and we lived way on the outskirts of Tampa when we first moved here. We lived north of Tampa in Land O'Lakes. And what their very first observation was that I had kind of missed and grown so accustomed to is how long some of our traffic lights are. That is no joke. We have some huge intersections in Tampa, and you can sit at a traffic light. I have timed one, and I'm not exaggerating, almost 3 minutes at a traffic light. So you can bet that that's going to add a lot of time to your commute or to when you're out running errands, when you're having to sit at these super long traffic lights. The other thing is the traffic. Now, it's nothing like California or New York or, larger cities like that, but we do have steady traffic pretty much all the time. It almost doesn't matter what time of day you go somewhere. There's always going to be a lot of traffic on the roads. Now, we do have the more congested, typical rush hour times like most places do, but I would say that there's never a super slow time. Unless, of course, it's like the middle of the night, that's different. So, like, if I were to go to the airport at, say, 3 a.m. from Land O'Lakes, it's probably going to take me maybe 20 minutes. Whereas during the day, when there's traffic, it could take double that easily. So that's one thing you need to keep in mind when you're picking where you want to live, is that the drive times can be very long, and it can be very deceiving. On a map, it can look like, oh, it's here to here. It's very short, but the drive time can be a whole nother story. So make sure you look at that at all different times of day to know what you're dealing with. This leads me to number 2, which I kind of already mentioned in number 1, is that greater Tampa, the Tampa area, it's very big, and I did not realize what all was included in Tampa when most people are talking about it. So Tampa proper, is located, the main county of Tampa is Hillsborough County. It's a very large county in Florida. I believe at last count it was 1.6 million. Yeah, about 1.6 million people. So it's definitely a large county. That is the main county, but when people talk about Tampa, they're not only talking about that, because they also could be talking about Pinellas County, where our beaches are. Though people mostly consider those beaches to be Tampa beaches. Technically, they are in a whole nother county, and St. Pete is the main city over there, St. Petersburg. But I would say the majority of people still would consider that the greater Tampa area. And also a couple of counties to the north of Tampa would also be included in this greater Tampa area that most people kind of all include as one area. The one closest north to Tampa is Pasco County, where a lot of people are moving because it's very fast growing. The urban sprawl has definitely crept up that way. That includes Land O'Lakes, Lutz, Wesley Chapel, towns like that I'm sure you've seen videos on. If not, you can definitely watch some of my videos on those areas. It's a super area to raise a family. Great schools, very close to Tampa. But even further north of that is another county that sometimes gets included in greater Tampa too. That would be considered, that is Hernando County. So that's a little more rural, less people there for sure than in Hillsborough or Pinellas. And I would say that's kind of the order of population would be Hillsborough number 1, Pinellas number 2, Pasco, and then Hernando. So if you like an area that's just a little bit further away and you want a little bit more property, a little more privacy, Hernando County might be a good fit for you. Pasco County as well. The northern parts of it are still somewhat rural. There's still a lot of growth that's going to be taking place there. That might be another good fit if you prefer an area that's not quite as busy. But that is number 2. Tampa is greater Tampa. It's much bigger than most people realize. Number 3 would be, for most people that are watching this video, it's because you're thinking about buying a home in this area. I am going to tell you, home maintenance is super important in Tampa. Not only just in Tampa, but I would say throughout Florida. But this is definitely something we've learned. You cannot put off your home maintenance, especially when it comes to your AC. Now, our AC systems work almost year-round. Most people's AC are an HVAC, so it also includes your heat. So they truly are working year-round. And honestly, there are some days in January, February, it's cold to our standards, where you might be running your heat in the evening and morning, and then later in the day you're going to have your AC on. So these systems are just worked to death, and it's super important to take care of them. You do not want to skip those biannual service calls that you put into your AC people, so they come out and they clean out the system, they check everything, make sure everything's good to go, because the worst thing that can happen is have your AC break down in the middle of the summer. 9 times out of 10 it's going to happen at night when everything's closed and you're going to be stuck in an 80-something degree house and miserable. Make sure you keep on top of that AC maintenance. It's also very important to continue to change those filters every month. And I don't know if you have to do this in other states, because I haven't lived anywhere else in so long, but here we have the little drain tube. You have to pour vinegar down that every month to keep it from getting like gunky inside of there. It gets really disgusting. If you forget to do that, guaranteed in the summertime when there's so much condensation going out of those tubes, it's going to get clogged, and you're going to have a service call to your AC company, and they're going to come out and they're going to vacuum it out with a dry vac, and it's going to cost you like $150 for something that you could have prevented by doing this vinegar down the drain. The other thing that we have here that a lot of places do not have is our homes, the majority of them are made with stucco. Now, stucco does crack, and it is something you have to stay on top of. If you do not fill those cracks, you can get water from the rain. We do get very heavy rains in the summer here. If the rain gets back in there, the stucco can start to separate from the home. It can turn into a very expensive problem. It's something you do not want to neglect. So every year you're going to have to get your little elastomeric, paint there to fill that in and paint it over, and that's just something that's going to have to be done on an annual basis. The other thing would be our roofs. Now, our roofs take a beating just as much as our AC systems do. As you can imagine, it's just scorching up there. Our roofs do not last near as long here as they might in other states, so you definitely want to stay on top of that too. Having someone come out and check it, making sure you're replacing it at regular intervals. I'd say the most you're going to get out of a roof is about 20 years here if it's shingle, even if it's a 30-year shingle. And the other problem with that is insurance. A lot of insurance companies will not insure you if your roof is older than a certain age. I think now it's about 15 years, so they keep making that shorter and shorter. But I'd say the most you'd want to go would probably be 20 years with replacing your roof. And if you have trees in your area, you want to make sure you're cutting those trees back so they're not on top of the roof. That damages the roof. You want to keep it cleaned off and clean out the debris out of your gutters all the time as well. That's going to save you a lot of trouble. So point being, home maintenance, super, super important in the Tampa Bay area. Number 4, something you're definitely going to want to know when you're living in the Tampa Bay area is that insurance is going to cost you a pretty penny. Whether it's car insurance or homeowner's insurance, it's a little bit more here than it is in most places. Now, the car insurance, I don't really have a good reason why for you, other than maybe there's just more accidents here. I know we have a very large elderly population. We have a very transient population, so I think there's different driving styles, different rules maybe that come into play. I don't know what it is, but we have a lot of accidents here. There's also a lot of fraud here, so that obviously leads to higher insurance costs. The fraud comes into play more on the homeowner's insurance, I think, than the car insurance. But yes, that is something that you are going to have to factor into your cost of living. And when my teenagers were young, I went with Geico, and it was the cheapest I could find, and they were about $350 each a month just for them. And that was not like some super insurance, that was just what was required, you know? So when they're teenagers, it hits particularly hard. Now that they're older, I feel like our insurance is pretty affordable. I think we're paying, maybe $150 or so each a month, but we are with USAA, which is one of the cheaper insurance companies. I don't think most people can get a rate quite that low if you're not a member of USAA. But just to give you an idea, that's what we're paying. I would expect most people are going to be in the neighborhood of $200, $250 a month per driver per vehicle. As far as homeowners insurance, there's so many different factors in that I can't even begin to tell you what you will be paying. It's going to depend not only on the home, but also on you, your credit, your insurance background, how many claims you've filed in the past and things of that nature, but also the age of the home, the age of the roof, the age of the AC, all of that factors in. And the price, of course, of the home, replacement value, things like that. So I can't even fathom a guess for anyone. Of course, if there's particular homes that you're looking at, you're interested in, I do work closely with several insurance agents. I'm happy to get you, a quote so you know what you're looking at. But I would say it's definitely going to be higher than what you're probably used to paying where you're currently living, because the cost of insurance in Tampa is pretty high. Now, number 5 is a fun one, the beaches. The beaches are absolutely the best beaches, in my opinion, anywhere in the world. I mean, I've been to a lot of different places. It's hard to find beaches as nice as ours. I mean, the sand is like sugar, the water is calm, most of the year it's warm, everything is very clean. Really, really great beaches. So the thing that I wish I knew when I first moved here that you will grow to know very soon is, 1, there's a lot of different beaches to choose from that a lot of people don't know about, and 2, is when you want to avoid going to the beach. So the beaches from Clearwater all the way down to St. Pete, there's a lot of beaches there. The smaller ones are the quieter ones, so it's all going to depend what type of beach you like. And we also have in very close driving distance the beaches like Siesta Key and Anna Maria Island, all of those. aren't going to be that far from you depending on what part of Tampa you're living in as well. So you've got a ton of choices when it comes to which beach to go to. If you like something lively, touristy, you're probably going to love Clearwater, St. Pete. Both of those beaches always have a ton of stuff going on, lots of events, lots of people. It's very busy, and if that's what you like, that's where you want to go. If you want something quiet, you're going to want to look for the smaller beaches like Indian Rocks and Reddington and Treasure Island. Those beaches are going to be a little bit quieter. Also, we have some parks that have beautiful beaches. Honeymoon Island is gorgeous. There's just so many to choose from. So I would say be sure you explore all of them. You're sure to find your favorite pretty quickly. But when to avoid the beaches is the most important. So you don't want to go when everyone else is going unless that's your kind of thing. Spring break is spread out all over America at different weeks of the year. So any time starting about mid-March through April, the beaches can be kind of a nightmare on the weekend. I mean, super crowded. Again, if you like that, then that's awesome. That might be the time you want to go. But you do need to figure those things out. And I would say most of the time when it's like that, I mean, for me anyway, I don't like going. So know the times to go to the beaches. Another important thing you're going to want to know if you're thinking of moving to Tampa is that the wages are low. So if you are still going to be working when you make the move over here to Tampa, then you're going to want to take that into consideration. Now, it used to be that Tampa was considered pretty affordable, and I would say, in comparison to a lot of other cities, that probably still holds true. However, these past few years, when COVID, hit and all of that happened, the housing just went through the roof. Our home prices have gone up, and our rent prices have gone up more than most states in the U.S. So if you're looking at those monthly costs, I think Tampa has gotten to be about 40% higher than most other areas is the latest statistic that I was able to find. So housing is the major factor because the wages are still low. It's taking a big chunk of people's money just to pay for their living expense. Now, when you're looking at things like gas, that's a little bit cheaper than a lot of areas. Groceries, I don't know. I think they're about the same, honestly. When I go and visit other states or I go and visit family members in other places, and I go to the grocery store, I don't see a big difference. So I don't think Tampa is a lot cheaper in a lot of areas. The main thing you will notice, I think, is the gas. That's a big expense for a lot of people. But for most people, your living expense is going to be your highest one. So you definitely want to keep that in mind when you're moving, because it's going to take a lot of money for you. And if your income goes down considerably, you might need to make adjustments with your living arrangement. So just keep that in mind, that Tampa has gotten pretty expensive for the monthly living expenses. Now, the final thing I want to cover of what you definitely need to know when you're moving to Tampa is taxes. So first and foremost, the good news is we have no state income tax. That's a huge savings for a lot of people. A lot of places do have a pretty high state income tax, so it does save you a lot of money just when you move here just for that. However, because we don't have a state income tax, when I talk to people that come from certain states, they tell me they feel like our property taxes are pretty high. Now, it's all relative because I also have a lot of customers that have moved here from California, New Jersey, New York, Chicago, places like that. They tell me that their property taxes are a fraction here what they were in that state. So it all depends where you're moving from. But just so you can compare apples to apples, so to speak, when you're looking in Hillsborough County, the current millage rate is, I think it's 17.9. So if you're looking at a $400,000 house and you just do the straight math on that, you're coming up with about $7,000 in taxes. Now, that does not take into consideration certain exemptions. If it's your primary home, we do have a homestead exemption here in Florida. Also, it's not taking into consideration what value the property appraiser is going to give that. That is typically different from what you actually paid for the home. I don't have a set formula on what they're going to assess that at. That is up to their discretion. I do find it seems like it typically winds up being around 80% or so of what people pay for it, but that's not a tried and true formula. It's just what I've kind of noticed on averages. But if you use those two figures, like someone claiming their homestead exemption and saying that the value of the property is going to be a little bit less than what you actually paid for it, and you take a $400,000 house at that millage rate, I'd say your taxes are going to be somewhere in the $5,000 range. Now, if you don't have any exemptions, obviously it's going to be higher if you're only living here part of the year and you cannot claim it as your primary residence. You will not qualify for that exemption, so that is going to make your taxes higher. The other thing that's great about our homestead exemption here in Florida is that it limits how much the county can raise your taxes each year. So if you have a homestead exemption on your property, the most they can raise your taxes every year is 3%, or the inflation rate, whichever is less. So that too saves you a lot of money. When you don't have that homestead exemption on a property, the taxes on it can go up considerably just based on the values. So it's a nice perk for people who are claiming Florida as their primary residence. That's definitely something you want to keep in mind as well. Well, there you have it, guys. Those are the 7 things that you definitely are going to want to know when you're moving to the greater Tampa Bay area. Speaking of which, if you are considering a move here to the Tampa Bay area, I would love to hear from you. It is my passion to help people make this move, and I would love to help you as well. If you have any questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can call me, text me, email me, whichever method of communication you prefer is fine. I'm always available. When it comes to moving to Tampa, I've got your back. One more quick favor before you go, please, please, please click subscribe. It does help me so much. I really appreciate it. I hope this video was useful for you, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.